All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, this is one that's a long time coming, guys. We are talking about the third entry in the Bill and Ted saga. Bill and Ted Face the Music. It's been 20 something years since the second one, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. And if you listened last week, my co-host Joe Black joined me to discuss those first two movies, and he is back now to talk about Face the Music. And I will just let you know right here at the top of the show, Joe didn't like this movie very much, and he has quite a few strong opinions about some of the themes and ideas that are put forward by Bill and Ted Face the Music. And I think we had a great conversation talking about what this movie means, what it means to the trilogy, and what it means as far as movies in 2020. And also what music means in 2020, because obviously music is so heavily ingrained in the meaning of these movies. So we get into some pretty big stuff in this episode. So buckle up and here we go. But before we do get into that, I want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. And you can rate and review us over on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod, and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. So with all that said, it's time to get into Bill and Ted Face the Music. All right, so last week we talked about Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and now Joe Black is back with us to talk about Bill and Ted Face the Music. How's it going, Joe?
Oh, I've seen better days.
So I can already tell this is going to be a highly emotional episode of Piecing It Together. We're we've got a lot to talk about here.
I'm going to do my best to not let emotion factor in. I want to be
Now,
as objective as possible.
I think it's important to tell the listeners to a little bit about your experience watching this movie, just so they understand. I mean, obviously, if they listen to the last one, they know that these movies mean a lot to you to begin with. So,
Yeah.
but also, I would imagine that the factors surrounding your viewing of the movie might have affected things a little bit, maybe.
Only for the positive, though, like surprisingly. So, yeah, Bill and Ted, kind of my favorite thing in the world. As I've said before, I have it tattooed on me. That's how much I love them. Uh, My fiance Kat woke me up one day and was like, "I got us tickets to go see it in El Paso, Texas." We live in Los Angeles and nothing is open here, but at the Alamo Draft House in El Paso, they were doing a screening of it. Um, it came out on Thursday on VOD, but they were screening it on Wednesday, so basically a day early. So she and I woke up at 5:30 on Wednesday morning, and we actually woke up at 4:45, and we drove all the way to El Paso, Texas, dropped things off at an Airbnb. Um, Went and saw I don't even want to call it a movie, but we went and saw it, and we faced the music, and then we we had a rib dinner, woke up the next morning and drove home. Um,
Oh boy.
yeah, crossed 4 states to see this thing.
I've driven to LA from Vegas specifically to watch a movie, but
It's
that's
4
a whole
hours.
nother level. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a whole nother level, man. I can only imagine the mindset that would put one in. But
I don't think I could have survived what happened had it not been for the circumstance, though. Like,
sure.
truly, like, being a filmmaker, let alone a film lover, let alone a Bill and Ted, fanatic, uh, what happened on that screen, was just a horror show, just a tragic, tragic horror show, and, but, like, I loved so much that, that Kat knows and loves me so much that she did that for me. I loved taking the trip with her. The Airbnb was lovely. It turned it into an experience that I can have outside of that 90 dreadful minutes.
All right, all right. Well, all I ask, Joe, I know you did not like this movie. All I ask is that In the process of talking about the films that we think may have inspired Bill and Ted Face the Music, let's go into this thing, ready to celebrate these characters and to, look at this thing in the most well-rounded way possible and not, you know, hate
Absolutely,
it
because that's
too
what Bill
much.
and Ted would do, man. So,
Exactly.
like, yeah, I
Exactly.
you know
So why don't we jump right into some puzzle pieces here? We'll get to talk about all the things we liked and didn't like about the movie along the way, but what do you got for your first piece?
Okay, so in order to organize myself to keep me from getting too, overzealous in my, whatever,
Good work.
I instead of doing pieces that might have inspired it, I decided to do this thing in my mind where I was like, "What are movie sequels that, like, took way too long to happen?" You know what I
Mm,
mean? What it surprised me was how many there are that,
sure.
like, you forget that there's, like, 10 years between certain movies and shit like that, and, so I listed them all, then I broke them up into 5 different categories, and,
Ooh,
the first category that I had was sequels that are too big. They're like it's the franchise is too big for it to really be ultimately completely successful. So you got like your Star Wars, right? Like Phantom Menace and Force Awakens were destined to fail no matter what, right?
mhm,
Indiana Jones 4, The Godfather 3. These are things that just were like kind of dead on arrival to an extent. Uh no matter the quality of the films themselves. But the one I want to focus on for this category is Star Trek 2009.
okay.
Um, J.J. Abrams, we calm down. All right, so J.J. Abrams wanted to direct Star Wars. Good for him. So he made Star Trek. Good for him. The positives of Star Trek 2009 were they took an intellectual property that everybody knew about. It had like a cult following, but everyone in pop culture knows the fundamentals of, Kirk, Enterprise, phasers, whatever.
Spock too. You got to throw
Exactly.
Spock in there.
Kirk and Spock, all more as a unit really than even as individuals, though.
Right.
And so he took those elements and he made these broad stroke characters, like caricatures, basically, of all the original characters. Put them in a ridiculous A to B scenario full of plot holes. But when you get into time travel, unless you're Bill and Ted, you really are digging yourself a hole to begin with. Um,
Mhm.
but what was so Star Trek for Star Trek fans was so grossly offensive because he just obviously didn't understand Star Trek. Like he
Right.
didn't understand that Kirk is not a stupid cowboy womanizer. He didn't understand that Starfleet is not like a military organization. He didn't, like so all of us Star Trek fans, as soon as Kirk puts money on the bar at the beginning, we're like, excuse me, there is no money in Star Trek. Or as soon as he sees the ship being built on Earth, we're like, no, they build the ships in orbit off of Mars. It's fine. Now we all kind of had to suppress that because in our minds, to quote Star Trek, in our minds, the good outweighed the bad. You know what I mean? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, as Spock says in
Sure.
Rathacon. And for what it is, Star Trek 2009 is a great looking, breezy, forgettable, fun movie.
Sure.
And that's coming from me, who more than hates that movie. Um,
Yeah, that's very nice of you.
exactly. And had Bill and Ted been that, maybe I would have forgiven it a little bit. But the lesson that I personally took from Star Trek was that no matter how good that movie was, look what's happened to Star Trek since. All the TV shows now are like violent and stupid and your typical war battle bullshit shows, completely destroying the whole original idea of Star Trek, which was this future of harmony, like where
Mhm.
we as human beings live in harmony and we have evolved past petty, squabbles. We no more bigotry, no more racism, no more class systems. It is utopia for humans, so we can now go and explore other races. We're not fighting other races. We're not conquering other races. But the shows now, because of the gate that Star Trek '09 opened, it allowed for that kind of pollution. And
Sure.
Bill and Ted, I don't see there being more Bill and Teds after this, please. But like when you talk about people who just got the fundamentals wrong right to begin with, I mean, Bill and Ted's music was supposed to bring the planet together in harmony. It wasn't supposed to stop a doomsday device.
Right.
Like, so this apocalyptic nonsense, like right out of the gate, it's like, oh, you don't get it. It was about creating harmony, not about literally saving the world from some evil force.
Now, okay, so we're getting right into that immediately here with the first piece, and we're already on to the fact that that whole setup has been changed a little bit here with
Hmm.
this third movie. And now, of course, we do have the original writers here,
Hmm.
so we've got our stars back. Do you think that after all this time, they get the opportunity to finally make the third one? And did they have anything in mind, or did they just jump right in and start writing right then and there?
Well, we'll get to. I'll brush up on that a little bit with my third puzzle piece,
Okay.
but like when it comes to that. But what I'll say is, you go back and you watch the end of Bogus Journey, and save for when the gun magically appears in Denomalos's hand. That finale is so wonderful, and
Mm,
them performing, you know, God gave rock and roll is like it's the greatest finale that you could ask for Bill and Ted, you know?
sure.
So when you hear about this new one, you're like, okay, so they're just ignoring the canon of themselves to begin with, which is very
Hmm.
strange, like they're ignoring that they had great success. They're even ignoring that Bill and little Ted were boys. Like they're ignoring all of this. And because of how good the second one was, because the second one wasn't just some like cash grab rehash, you think to yourself, "Oh, maybe they're doing this for a reason."
Hmm.
And the reason, the only reason I can see after watching it, I don't even want to call it a movie, was that they were bored.
Well, I am going to move on to my next puzzle
Hmm.
piece. But I will say, though, leading into it, I should just get this out of the way. I also didn't love it, but I think I liked it more than you did. But we'll see
Hmm.
where I'm at by the end of this conversation.
Sure.
Uh, so, with that being said, you went with Star Trek and you mentioned Star Wars along the way. I'm going to go with the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which of course acts as both a continuation of the originals as well as sort of this reboot to set up new characters and a new hero along the way, and that is exactly what we're doing here. We are getting back all of our favorites and giving them things to do while also trying to set up these new characters, Bill and Ted's daughters, who I found to be pretty fun, even if they were a part of the engine that was to ruin Joe Black's dreams. But
I
but
don't think so personally.
I think that I think that they had their heart in the right place though with these two characters. I think that they were fun. I think the fact that Ted was strictly just a caricature, impression, and Bill being more of like a straightforward character kind of. I liked that way of putting these characters together. I'm not going to sit here and praise them because I also don't think that they really had anything to do with these characters aside from just send them on a repeat of the first movie just with
Ugh.
musicians instead. But
Yeah.
I'm saying though that I come in somewhere far above Joe on this one. I definitely think that they were at least a little bit of fun.
Well, I thought that they were just god awful in every way. Because well, first of all, the two actresses, you can tell that the actor who played Theodore prefers they them.
Samara Weaving played T, and Bridget Lundy Paine played Billy.
So T was you could tell that what's her name? The actress who played T? It doesn't matter. You could
Yeah,
tell that they
Bridget.
watched a a clip on YouTube before the audition real quick and like just did it because there's nothing going on there. The genius to Keanu Reeves as a performer is that he's not stupid. He's actually a brilliant actor who
Mm,
is like his performance in Speed, I genuinely think is one of the most underrated performances of all time. It's so nuanced and brilliant.
interesting.
She's just doing a bad impression. Weaving, you can tell that she like has heard of Bill and Ted, maybe like through the grapevine. There is no character there, and like I've never before noticed somebody being so like trying to hide their accent so badly. Like it was watching the two of them was a shit show, and their characters are everything that's wrong with modern I'll get into that later though. But when you're talking about your piece there, the
As the
Star
Star
Wars
Wars.
sequel trilogy, Force Awakens, as you know, up until a couple days ago, was probably my least favorite movie of all time. This movie, but The Last Jedi, I thought was brilliant. Now, a
Sure.
lot of people hated The Last Jedi. You and I are in the minority, at least
Hmm.
the vocal minority, that we liked it. And I can see where, as a Star Wars fan, that would be a tough pill to swallow because it's scary what they're saying in that movie. You know what I mean? They're kind
Sure.
of like saying we need to move on. We need to move past this. Bill and Ted could have done the same thing had it not been for the fact that the daughters just flat out steal the journey of Bill and Ted. And Bill and Ted themselves have no effect on the outcome without the help of others. Like, like, even at the end of the movie, when their daughters are the ones who are supposed to do the song that saves the world, um, it's the wives who figure out how to use the phone booth properly to put instruments in everybody's hands. Bill and Ted are
Well,
just completely inept.
and see, and to that point, and I knew before I even saw the movie when you messaged me and told me you'd seen it the 2 days early, and you just sounded just utterly defeated. I knew immediately why why you didn't like this movie. I knew that was coming,
It's a step
but
further, though. It's a step further than what you would have assumed because the girls don't even play fucking instruments.
no, they don't at all. But and here's the thing though, and I, again, this is all going to be very tempered. My defending of the movie, but here's the thing though, is that Bill and Ted are absolutely a part of this whole thing. They're a part of the band. They went back in time in the first movie, met the princesses, got married, had these kids, raised them. It's still
But
them who are the engine for saving this future.
I don't agree because nothing that they learned other than their passion for music was imparted to their children. Like their
Mm,
kids are smarter than them, their kids are better at like it's nothing that they are losers. And this
mhm.
goes into a much deeper, darker territory that I was planning on getting into a little bit later. Um,
Okay.
of the agenda behind this movie. Um, and yeah, that also part piece number 3 is going to be the real
Uh-oh.
bombshell. So let's get to 2.
Yeah,
Um,
let's get to number
yeah.
2. What do you got next?
Okay, so the other another category of sequels that took forever are the sequels that no one asked for.
Mm.
Right? So you got movies like Texasville, which was a sequel to The Last Picture Show, or
Hmm.
Evening Star, which was a sequel to Terms of Endearment. Did you even know about these films?
No, not yet.
Exactly. But you've heard of those first ones, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Sure.
like, who needs a sequel to Terms of Endearment? She died of cancer. The end. Um, then you've got like Basic Instinct 2, which is like, I
Mm.
don't really want to know what Sharon Stone is up to pushing 60. I don't care.
Mhm.
But the one that nobody asked for that I personally really love, I'm trying to keep this positive, is Blues Brothers 2000.
Okay.
So Blues Brothers 2000 gets a lot of valid criticism for being a unnecessary rehash of the original minus some of the magic that made it what it was. Correct.
Mhm.
You're absolutely correct, critic, Um
Sure.
for sure. One of the reasons I love or well, a couple of the reasons I love this movie so much though are one, it existed as a love letter to those who were gone and forgotten. Right? Like it existed as a love letter to how to what Jim Belushi or John Belushi rather than Jim Belushi, what John Belushi, what Cab Calloway, what all these people had to offer the world, right?
Mhm.
And the fact that they're older now, the Dan Aykroyd and even John Landis, they're in that phase of their life where they're reflecting on the things that made their lives what they are that are now gone, right?
Mhm.
But the movie then takes it a step further too and tries to preserve what can be preserved, which is the music itself, because the music is in the type of music, the blues, the hard blues and electric blues, is in the same danger of being forgotten like John Belushi, like, you know what I mean? Like Calloway.
Sure.
So the movie exists also as a reminder to people. That's why they have the character of Buster, who learns to grow an appreciation for this kind of music. And the film doesn't try to like shove it in our faces that modern music sucks. It all it does is reminds us of how valid this thing is and how it
Right.
can still be effective. And for me, I really love that. As much of a rehash as the movie is, and has I love Blues Brothers 2000. And had Bill and
Mhm.
Ted done something like that, we'd be in good shape. But no, I do not believe that the world will be saved by Jesus playing a cowbell to a Kid Cudi beat.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, I do love the passion with which you just spoke about Blues Brothers 2000, so if nothing else, we got that from this movie. Um, yeah, I do, we talked about this on the last episode about how much the first two movies love music. As a
Mhm.
matter of fact, I just posted an audiogram of a clip of that portion of the conversation, and
Oh.
that is, I definitely think, something this movie is kind of missing, and unfortunately, it goes right back to something I was saying during that conversation, and that is that people don't love music. Now, I mean, music has just become this kind of it's content, and I don't think I think it's just a thing that people put on and collect, or
And
maybe
that's the
not even
evils of
that.
the ending. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There and my buddy Vincent put it best when he was talking about this movie. He hated it as well. That there are no
Mhm.
more rock stars. Kid
Right.
fucking Cudi, are you kidding me?
Right, that's
You
the
know what I
best I could
mean?
get. I mean, I listen to, plenty of hip hop. I've
Sure.
heard two Kid Cudi songs, you know?
Right, right, exactly. But again, even Kid Cudi in the movie, like, he's not a fucking rock star. He's some super intelligent, astrophysicist of sorts. And it's like
Right.
it feels like a not funny joke because that's what it is. And even Dave Grohl popping up. Dave Grohl popping up was so sad. That was actually, I will give the movie credit. The one sequence I really liked in the movie was them being British in the
Mm.
mansion, like the future selves acting British. I thought that was really brilliant. And Alex Winter deserves many accolades and awards for his performance in this movie as Bill. He's brilliant in this movie. Um, but Dave Grohl pops up because it turns out twist it's his house. And like when he popped up, I was like, yeah, he's not really a rock star either anymore, man. He's in the fucking
Right.
Muppets these
It's
days.
it's outdated to have him in the movie
Yeah.
in a way, in a
The
weird
best
way.
the best is in Bogus Journey when the guy from Faith No More, his one line in the movie is he's just looking at a picture of Denobulos and just goes, "What a shithead." Like, that's his only contribution to the movie, and that's beautiful? But in this, they
S
say Dave Grohl's house every time they talk about the house because it's, like, referential and funny, and that's.
Right, right. Well, before I move on to my next piece, I do very short, quick tangent. You were just talking about Alex Winter, how much you loved him in this. Uh, do you think Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves are at least having fun with this?
Absolutely. Keanu Reeves has proven himself in later years to be kind of, in my opinion, irresponsible, um,
Hmm,
for the sake of fun. Like, I find the John Wick movies to be, like, progressively more and more, like, offensive and damning.
love
Um,
him.
which I get,
Yeah,
but watching somebody shoot people point blank in the head for 90 minutes does something to your soul.
yeah. Well,
Like
I
the
always did find it funny that he's like this America's sweetheart guy, and yet he makes the absolute most violent movies imaginable, and
yeah. I mean,
it's a really funny thing.
I've been a Keanu defender for years, and I mean, of course, it starts because I loved Bill and Ted. That's one of my first cognizant loves for movies. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But like, I was there through the dark years, through the Matrix sequels and the Constantine, saying no, these are actually good. And now people are coming around and pretending like they liked them all along, and I'm like, you liars, you absolute liars! You did the same thing with Ben Affleck, you did the same thing with Eddie Murphy. You don't really care. Um,
Right.
but the stuff he's doing now just seems really kind of pandering and servicey. Alex Winter to me, of all the people involved, seemed like the one most invested
Mm.
in a creative and artistic way. And it shows in his performance. Keanu is very good as Ted, of course. You know what I mean. He's still got it. But Alex Winter is giving a performance. Alex Winter, you look in his eyes when he's performing. He's in the moment. He's
Mhm.
happening. Um he's not always going for the joke. He's not afraid to go dark, which is why the second Bill and Ted works. Um
Right.
and I was very grateful for that little, like just when you think the movie's flatline, there's a little, like, "Boop," you know, beep, every now and then until that fucking finale.
Well, we'll get there, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm gonna go
I'm
with
just
my
saying
next
I'm being
piece.
pretty to the point with my puzzle pieces. You're the one who's probing me, so this is on you, bud. This is on
I, I
you.
I know, I know. It's gonna happen. Well, this one was inevitable, I think, even before we saw the movie. But it's a movie that we covered here on the show before. It is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. Kevin Smith's rehash of previous movies featuring Jay and Silent Bob,
Mhm.
with not really much to go on as far as a furthering of the story. It's just remember these moments. Let's kind of redo some of that, introduce some new characters, maybe pass it off to those new characters if we can. And aside from that, just kind of cash in on nostalgia.
Well, you played perfectly into my hands here because my third puzzle piece was Jay and Silent Bob Reboot
Of
slash
course.
Clerks 2. Um,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
so like this is from the category that I call cult sequels, movies that were made for specific little groups of people, and it didn't matter if it was 20 years because we're gonna go anyway. So you got your Super Troopers 2, which I really loved, Anchorman 2, which I think is even better than the first, Zoolander 2. With Anchorman 2, I know I
I,
think the story in Anchorman 2 is far better than the story of Anchorman 1, and there's a lot more to say.
That may be fair, but we don't need to go down that
Well,
tangent.
let's
We'll
think,
just leave it
David.
at
Which
that.
one has Kanye West in it? Um, but Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, or Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, and Clerks 2 are the ones I want to focus on with this
Okay.
because Clerks 2, he did what they did with Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which is he did not remake Clerks 1.
Right.
Right? He pushed these people further. In Clerks 1, all they do is kind of realize why they're in such a shit situation in their life. In Clerks 2, he calls them into action. And it's
Mhm.
great. He gives them a new surrounding, a new environment. It's fantastic. And flawed, and flawed, but it's
Uh-huh.
fantastic. Jay and Silent Bob Reboot is what everyone was afraid Clerks 2 was gonna be, which is
Sure.
nothing but what they call now fan service, and worse than that, it's lazily made. The big problem I had with Bill and Ted Face the Music is how poorly made the movie is. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know if do you see it at a theater?
Oh, no, I had to see it at home, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you could tell, but in the theater, in the scenes in the future especially, I mean, you could tell at home that the green screen was bad, but
Mhm.
literally in the theater, you can see the blue screen in, Alex Winter's hair. You can
Yeah,
see it,
it felt very cheap.
yeah,
I
that
can
robot costume, what the fuck was that? Like, I think I may have mentioned this, but one of the producers of the movie, used to frequent a bar that I worked at, and he showed me a clip on his phone. He showed me months ago, he showed me the prison scene,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Uh-oh." But, like, but when it was over, he was like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, I'd be curious to see what the robot looks like when all the effects are done."
Uh-huh.
Not knowing that the effects were done. This
That was
robot,
him.
if you haven't seen this movie, this robot makes the Power Rangers Zords look like, like real. Like it is so bad, this robot.
Mhm.
Um, but this movie commits all three sins that Jay and Silent Bob Reboot commits, which is one, it's just a rehash of the plots from one and two. It's
Mhm.
literally like Bill and Ted traveling through time, trying to, get to a show on time, and B, a killer robot sent back from the future. It's specifically designed to kill them. And when it does, they have to find death and get back to Earth. Like,
Yes.
awful. Commits that sin. B, it commits the sin of being lazily slapped together. This movie is
Mhm.
so slapped together, and I don't think that that's something that can be argued. I'm not even, you know what I mean? Like, it looks
Sure.
bad. It's a poorly made movie. Lastly, the passing off of the torch to the daughters is inauthentic for two reasons. The exact same problems with Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which are one, this idea of like having more women in movies and more franchises built around women, great. Let's do it. Rock and roll,
Yeah.
100%. I think it is the antithesis of the idea for that movement to try to do that with franchises where the women will simply be piggybacking on off of the success of white male led franchises. So don't
Mhm.
give me a fucking female James Bond. Give me Atomic Blonde. Don't, you know what I mean?
Right, right.
So just fundament the fundamentals of that idea are so stupid and so regressive, I can't handle it. But two, and this is what I was talking about with the music thing. The most offensive thing out of all of the movie to me was actually beyond Bill and Ted. Not it didn't matter that they were fucking with the canon where Bill and Ted, Rufus was not some wise mystic like they say he is in this one. Um, Wild Stallions, not Preston and Logan, changed the world with their music.
Mhm.
In this, it's not Wild Stallions, Preston and Logan, because plot twist, it was the girls all along. But so like fucking with the canon, that's one way to really break my heart. But the scary thing in the movie is that these girls don't play music. And it speaks
They even say they don't
exactly.
at the big climactic scene.
This is the creepiest. This is where we get into where people like really shut me off and call me a conspiracy theorist. No, this is an attack. No, seriously, bear with me. So I just made bear hands. If you guys can't see, that's what I do. Anyways, so these girls, their mission in the movie is they decide to go back in time and put together a super group to help their dads play at the show, right? And how do they get each one of these people? By sharing their fandom, right? They
Mhm.
basically fan and geek out on these people, and the flattery gets to all of them, and they come together because of their fandom. And then the
Mhm.
girls play a metronome, basic beat and get the
Right.
credit for what all these people do and save the world, right? By creating harmonious music or whatever.
Mhm.
So that speaks to all the evils and ills of this current culture, of this nerd fan culture, of the millennial generation. Bill and Ted, when they saved the world, they still had to do 16 months of guitar lessons. Bill and Ted actually had to put in effort, had to learn how to create. They had to put in the time. They had to put in the care and consideration to really know what it is to create something. I'm sorry, millennial generation, but you cannot replicate the things you love. You just can't do it. All you
Mhm.
can do is be inspired by them to create great things yourself. But this movie dares to and on top of the girls not playing and just doing that stupid fucking DJ beat, which how did two of them do it at the same time and both take credit is beyond me. But putting in the movie, they put an instrument in everybody's hand across all of space and time. What are you
Mhm.
talking about? What are you talking about? Nobody knows how to play the fucking trumpet. That's why Louis Armstrong is amazing. You know what I mean? Because he took the time. He cared enough. It's his passion. It's not yours. You may be passionate about what he made, but creating was his passion and using that as his instrument. To There's a severe serious attack on story and streaming movies and digital filmmaking. All of this stuff is designed to attack stories. It is designed to turn story into content. And the reason you want to turn
Content.
and
Yeah.
if you're evil, the reason you want to turn story into content is because stories exist to educate and inspire.
Mm.
And you don't want that. As the world becomes more and more aware of what's actually going on in it, you don't want people to be inspired or educated. You want people to be busy.
Right. Right.
So like
Exactly.
so this movie is existing to reaffirm that idea in the most evil way, which is to say almost without knowing it. Like
Right.
that's how deeply rooted
Well,
this.
that's exactly right, because I think they went into this with the best of intentions. I think you're 100% right that they didn't realize that that's kind of the message that they're putting forward.
Well, and it's hard to argue with like everybody came together and played music at the end and there was peace and
Right.
harmony. It's like, yeah, correct. None of those people could play any music. Do you know what that would actually fucking sound like? And also, I mean, this is taking it like even further. The idea of Bill and Ted in the film, suddenly Bill and Ted are not good husbands. Suddenly Bill and Ted are arguably not good fathers. And the thing that makes them good fathers is that they pass their fan of musicdom on to their daughters. And what creeps me out about that is because that almost exists to like emasculate men in a
Mm.
way. Like there are no positive male characters in this. Like Bill and Ted are positive people, but they don't do anything. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? They don't actually have an effect other than literally fighting with themselves for the whole movie, only to
Mhm.
let, women take over at the end, which is a terrifying thing. I did love at the beginning of the film, I had such hope, David, because I thought when they played at the wedding, what was incredible at the movie opens with them performing at a wedding and everybody hates it. But what was really incredible was that their music was good for what it was. His throat singing was awesome and really well
Right.
done. That theremin playing, Ted was playing that theremin like a fucking like maestro. Like it was amazing, right? But the problem is, so this is really interesting. This is the only part that's really tangent for me.
Okay.
Art, what is art? My buddy Andre and I were talking about this the other day, and he put it very clearly for me, and I loved it. He said, art is the sliding scale between an idea and an abstract, right? So, like, art is you trying to bring those two together to a certain degree, an idea,
Mhm.
a concept, and an abstract. So, you've got on this sliding scale of art, you've got stuff that's like flat out, like, idea concept. You got your, like, Britney Spears pop music. I'm not a girl, not yet a woman, right? And on
Mhm.
your like way too abstract side, you've got your like Jackson Pollock, where you're like, what the fuck is this? You know what I
Right.
mean? Where you're too married. So that sliding scale is very important. Finding that sweet spot is what it means to be an artist and what it is to create something that will really have an effect. And what they almost seemed like they were setting up in Bill and Ted is that Bill and Ted were so fixated on the pressure of being great that they lost sight of what it actually means to be great and just focused on being as good as they could at playing music. Like they learned
Mhm.
every instrument. And they've gone so far in that Jackson Pollock deep end that they don't know how to connect with the world anymore. That they
Right.
had to rediscover. That would have been a fucking epic movie, right?
Mhm.
Like, and their daughters could have helped with that. And they could have made a band together. Like maybe their
Right.
daughters who are like just starting out, who are like into pop music that Bill and Ted can't jive with, like teach, like they could have done anything with that idea. And so for that first 10 minutes, I was like, oh my God, is this what I was hoping for? Is there a chance that this could be? But no, at the end of the day, the guys who know everything about music are reduced to a guitar solo at the end of a song,
Hmm.
and that to me again is a violent attack on art, which is a violent attack on society.
So I I will say before moving on, the first portion of what you were saying there,
Mhm.
about the contentification of music and art and it just kind of placating us, and I think that that is really interesting, and it really does make the case, I think, for the biggest problem with the movie.
Mhm.
In that it loses sight of what makes music special and what makes music important. And if this is a movie where music, a series where music is going to save the world, it's kind of got to be important. It can't just be this thing that people put on in the background or whatever, where people are a fan of, like you said. And so I think that that is really really interesting. And I don't know, you kind of got to me with that one.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate you like letting me like rant, and I appreciate like I hope I didn't get because like I said from the beginning of this podcast, 3 was going to be the big one where I got really
Yes.
like because here's the thing, I I get that's the hill that I always die on. I am a theme and purpose person first when it comes to any movie. If you've ever heard,
Sure.
if you know me, or if you've heard any of the podcasts
I've
that
noticed that.
yeah, yeah, like
Yeah.
that's my thing. So that's always going to be the lens that I see things through, for better or worse. And it creates that disconnect that I was talking about, where I do feel disconnected from society sometimes because of it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Where like I can't go and enjoy Batman Begins. You know what I mean? It
Mhm.
really sucks. But but on top of that, the reason why I'm hoping that I'm doing a good job and will continue to do a good job for these last two pieces of not getting too emotional is because at the end of the day, the film is bad. It's a
Mm.
poorly made film.
Right.
So I'm not worried about it. Even if people watch it and like it, nobody is going to like 10 years from now be like, I want to watch Face the Music again. It's just not going to
Right.
happen.
Yeah. But I do think as many interesting points as you're bringing up for just how bad this gets. I do think though that it doesn't hurt the first two movies
Not at
in
all.
any in any real way. Like
Because the second one has a final, a
it's an
finale.
ending. Yeah.
Exactly. The second one, this to exist had to rewrite the whole canon. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Which is why it kind of works as reboot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this one had to completely rewrite that canon. So, and that's fine. That's really fine. And there's so many ways they could have solved this. Why wouldn't it be that like the future reaches out to them because the universe is tearing itself apart? Maybe because of the things that happened in the first one, how they had to manipulate time and space to, save the blah blah. So
Th-
they don't know what to do and they're working with Bill and Ted.
That's actually a good setup for my next puzzle piece,
Awesome.
which is the Treehouse of Horrors 5 Time and Punishment segment from The Simpsons, when
It's
Homer keeps messing shit up in the present by changing the past.
yes.
This is kind of the exact opposite. I mean, they're going forward and everything just keeps getting worse and worse, and they have to keep digging in and keep using the time machine, and they're never going to really in any real way be able to fix what they have started. And now that you mention it, that could have been really the place for the story to go.
That
It could have
yeah.
been that this all has been in progress since the first one, and they need to fix everything that they've changed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I got really excited when you said that because that's my favorite episode of that show. And
Hmm.
in my last film that I made, plug for my own work, Tellers. There's the girl has a tattoo of a fish on her neck, and the main character, his thing that he says to her all the time is, I wish I hadn't killed that fish." Which is from that
Right.
episode with Homer's friend.
Nice.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, exactly. See, like, that's the weird thing. Like you said, there is a third movie you could tell. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like for sure. The destiny was fulfilled, but like this is a nice little like post adventure. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like that could have been and that would be the perfect place to bring in the daughters. That's why like Star Wars The Last Jedi works for me too, because it's not like, oh, all of a sudden they found out that what Luke did and Darth Vader did had no effect. No, that's not true. The whole until fucking uh, that last one
Rise
was
of Skywalker.
Rise of
Awful.
Skywalker. Yeah.
Just terrible.
What the problem was somebody was trying to bring that back. You know what I
Mm.
mean? That was the conflict of the new Star Wars. So that's why you could bring in new characters and why the mantle could be passed on, right? And that's what original Star Trek is all the time. That's the conflict in Star Trek is somebody who doesn't understand and somebody who is, you know what I mean? And usually by the end
Sure.
of Star Trek, they come to an understanding.
Mhm.
Like you watch the first season of The Next Generation when they have to kill there's this one episode with this slug species that goes into brains and turns people into mindless zombies. And at the end of it, Picard and Riker have to destroy the
Mhm.
species. And the last 5 minutes of the episode is dedicated to them talking about how what a shame it was and how much
Hmm.
it's affected them that they had to do this. And nowadays you've got like Star Trek where people are getting their eyeballs drilled out, and shit. And it's like, well, what do you expect? Why do you think Donald Trump is the president? Why do you think that there are riots? Why do you think that I'm serious, like you're not helping with this. Like things like Star Trek were designed to help with this. They were designed to give people even if it's just a carrot dangling in a face, you know what I mean? And you're
Mhm.
taking that away for the sake of content and profit and laziness,
Mhm.
you know? I need to not do
God.
that again. I'm sorry. That you I went right back into it. But Simpsons, I love it. Should I do my
Yeah.
next one?
Let's do your next one.
These next two will be much faster. Well, this one will be faster. um so the next one that I had was sequels that were trying to act as their own movies. So, like,
Mm.
you've got, like, your Blade Runner 2049. They were trying to hook the non-Blade Runner audience. You know what I mean? You didn't have to know what Blade Runner was to wanna see this movie. Mad
Mm.
Max Fury Road, that's another one where, that is, as we know, one of the most successful, uh, sequels of all time. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But for me, the most interesting one of those in recent memory is Tron Legacy,
Right.
which is my personal favorite of those 3. Even though Mad Max is quote unquote better objectively.
Mhm.
Tron Legacy, when I first saw the trailer for that was during James Cameron's absolute turd nugget of a movie, Avatar. And they played a trailer. I didn't even know there was a new Tron coming out. And when I saw that trailer in a sold out show opening night of Avatar, I stood up and I screamed in excitement. And I was the only one. like, um, and I fully expected I had a year to prep. saying, okay, I've got to accept that this is not going to be cerebral, thoughtful, spiritual, existential, metaphysical Tron. This is going to be Pirates of the Caribbean Tron. It's going to be
Sure.
an adventure film set in the Tron world. It looks cool. I'm good with that. I'm very okay with that. Same way I had to prep myself for the Justice League movie after Batman versus Superman. But when I went and saw Tron Legacy in the theater, within 5 minutes, my jaw was on the floor, and by the end of the film, I had all but drowned in my own tears of happiness because
Mm-hmm.
they gave us Tron again. They gave us a film that was the same tone and spirit, taking the idea even further. They trusted that the concept was cool enough, that the design was cool enough, that Disney was big enough. They trusted that people would come. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? They really did. And you don't have to see the first Tron to see Tron Legacy, right?
Sure.
Now, Tron Legacy ultimately they decided was not as successful as they wanted it to be. But I still applauded that movie because for me, flaws and all, it's a perfect film because it is true to the spirit of the original while completely opening itself up to a new audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And knew that $500 million is a good job. Like you did a good job.
Sure.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And them not making a Tron 3 makes sense. Why? Because they spent 150, $200 million on Tron 2, right? Same thing with Mad Max, same thing with Blade Runner.
But they are now making one,
What and what?
a Neutron.
Ah, yes. Funny enough, how it'll be like 20 years later.
Yeah.
And if Joe Kosinski's not on board, yawn. But I mean, I'll be there. Of course, I'll go see it. I love
Of
Tron.
course.
Tron is like almost up there with Bill and Ted, almost. But Bill and Ted, I was hoping for something like that because the beauty of Bill and Ted is that you could make. I mean, how much did this movie cost? 20 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Max.
you could make this movie for you don't you. There's no risk.
Mm-hmm.
There's no risk in that way. You know what I mean? Like this movie will turn a profit no matter what. And they could have utilized this to to great effect. They could have let them do anything, like they didn't need to make it something they didn't have to have a robot in it who like feels bad for what he does because that's modern humor. They didn't have to have Kid Cudi, Dave Grohl references to hook the kiddies. They didn't need to do that. You know what I mean?
I will defend Dennis Caleb McCoy. He made me laugh quite a bit, but Joe looks so just
It's the
disapproving.
same joke for 45 minutes, and it was the only time it's kind of funny is when he's saying it when they're in hell and Bill just cuts off like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah," and he claps for
Yeah,
him.
that was
That's
good.
the only time it was funny.
Well, funny thing about that is at first I absolutely hated the character. I just thought it was just like, oh my God, are they just trying to recreate the death, character in a robot now? Like, is that what's happening here? And I thought it was just a terrible one note joke, but the way that they continued to beat it into the ground, it became funny to me. So
I
I
guess.
eventually kind of liked it.
That's that Family Guy rhythm that I just don't dance to, you know what I mean? And that's,
Mm,
again, not a criticism, it's just, like, not my brand. I'm a Marx
right.
Brothers guy through and through. You do the joke once and move on before people even knew there was a joke. I will say, I don't know why this made me think of it. There is one joke in Bill and Ted that made me laugh so hard, this new one, and it was another nobody else laughed. But it was just when they landed really hard in the phone booth, it happens every time, but one time in particular when they land, Bill just goes, "Damn it." Like
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go with another piece, but I think that these are maybe getting a little redundant at this point. So I'm just going to do this one quickly, and then we'll get on to your last one. And I'm going to combine two movies that I had on my list, which are actually Independence Day and Independence Day Resurgence, the
Ooh.
sequel to Independence Day. So we'll go first with the sequel. Just basically, again, like I said, we're kind of just going over well-worn territory here, but basically just bringing back the old characters, retreading the similar beats, trying to introduce new characters, but they're all basically kind of stale, and we're not going to really care about continuing with them onto future movies. I mean,
Sure.
it's hard to imagine that even people who like this movie a lot, which there are plenty of people who are saying that it's great, are really going to be on board for yet another one. I love the original Independence Day, and I'm not looking forward to Independence Day 3 if that ever happens. But back to the original, though, the ending is so incredibly similar that we find a way to save the day and then have to go and tell everybody in the world how
Mhm.
to do it. Except for here, it's in different timelines or different, times or
Yeah.
whatever it is exactly. But the same thing though, America wins, and we're gonna send the information on how to win to everyone else.
Yeah, see, I'm very forgiving of stupid shit like that as long as like the spirit and purpose are in sync, you know? Like the ending to
Hmm.
Independence Day is so stupid, but I really like
Right.
it. You know, like they
It's
give it a
great.
virus. And the same can be said about like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, which is like they establish in the first Bill and Ted that like time is of the essence and you can't change this current timeline that you're in. You know, they have to get to San Dimas on time for their report. And at the end of
Hmm.
Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, when they do a 16-month guitar lesson, all of a sudden they're able to get back on time. Like
Right.
that kind of fucks things up. But the reason they do it is so necessary, something we didn't even realize was necessary until this newest one. I didn't appreciate how necessary it was that they actually had to put in the time to learn to get good.
Right.
Um, but Independence Day does the same thing. You know what I mean? Like it's you're in the spirit of the movie at that point. And I
Right.
really
Right.
liked Independence Day too. I really liked it a lot.
I'm sure you did.
I but
You
but
were
but 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 I'm in the same boat as you. It's like I'm not like, "When is 3 coming out?" And if 3
right.
came out, I'd be like, "Hey, what day is it? Wednesday? Nah, I don't work till 6."
Yeah.
But what I liked about 2 was that it's what Shane Black refers to as playing in the sandbox. You know
Mm,
what I mean? It's like you just got a bunch of action figures and you're having fun in the sandbox for 2 hours because the special effects are so like I mean, Independence Day and Armageddon, that double whammy, they changed movies forever, summer movies.
sure.
And so, like, you can't really impress us with visual effects anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
In that way. So what do? You just they made their story as big and fun as the effects were in the first one. There's 1,000 characters who are all very unique and very broad, you know, like South African headhunters and you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And I appreciated that. And so by the time you get to the ending with the 80-foot tall alien queen running with a gun chasing a school bus, I'm like, sure, sure. You know what I mean? 3 minutes longer and I would have hated the movie, but I thought it was fun.
All right. Well, what do you got for your last piece then, Joe Black?
Okay, so this whole journey that I have been on in my brain, we started with Star Trek, which everyone loved, but I hated. We had Blues Brothers 2000, which everyone hated, but I love, but understand. Then we had Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which everyone hated, thank God. Um, and then Tron Legacy, which is one that kind of like nobody felt anything except for people like me. The
Mhm.
last one here is what is, in my opinion, the most successful of these late era sequels. Um, and this category is a category that I call the inevitable,
Mm,
which is you've got your movies like Dumb and Dumber 2, like that was gonna happen one day. You know what I
sure.
mean? Incredibles 2 was gonna happen one day. Um, but the most successful late era sequel, in my opinion, is Rocky Balboa.
Mm,
And I will be similarly comparing this to Creed as I did with Jay and Bob Reboot to Clerks 2. Rocky
mhm.
Balboa is a movie that fundamentally should not have worked. It was, the Rocky 5 was such a letdown for people. I like Rocky 5, but I get again why people felt it wasn't a good finale to that franchise. Sylvester Stallone needed a comeback, like so we knew a Rocky movie was coming, if not Rocky and Rambo, and lo and behold, we got both. But I was so excited for Rocky. Rocky 2 is the one thing in this world that means more to me than Bill and Ted.
Mm.
Rocky is a character and specifically the film Rocky 2. And I was so excited for Rocky Balboa that I did not read anything. If the trailer started in the theater, I ran out of the theater. I did not nothing. And I went totally blind and have you seen the film?
A long time ago, but yeah.
Like everyone else. Um
Sure.
at the beginning of the movie, Adrian is dead.
Mhm.
And it was so traumatic for me. It was a bad year in my life, and that was the Christmas movie, and Adrian being dead ripped my throat out. I literally
Yeah.
left the theater and punched a hole in the theater wall. Um, and they forgave me, but about a week later, I went back because I had to sit through it. I was traumatized by
Mhm.
the fact that Adrian was gone, and little Marie, the character from the first one, comes back and she's older now and she's obviously like attracted to Rocky and like like clutching the seats, just like don't you fucking do it, like don't you go there, you can't replace Adrian, you piece of shit movie. And like I went in like everybody else being like a 60-year-old man's gonna fight a young guy, bullshit, oh my god, blah blah blah. But man, by the end of Rocky Balboa, I was like, win,
You're right.
fucking win. He could do it. They fully made me believe that it could happen. And why? Because Rocky stayed true to the character. Never once did they stray from Rocky. None of the new world influence, none of the new ways movies had changed or society had changed affected who Rocky was. And that spirit cannot be broken.
Right.
You can
And
only.
that movie is great. I
It's
had so much.
great.
I enjoyed it so much
And
back
it's
when
a
it came out.
huge hit. Huge hit for what it was. It made like $100 million. You know what I mean?
Mm.
At a time when that was a lot of money. '06, that was still pretty damn impressive for a drama. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And just a phenomenal film. Cut to just shy of 10 years later, and now we've got the new trend, which is the spin-off, reboot, passing of the torch, Creed. And until this last week, Creed was the most offensive movie I'd ever seen in my life. Because before I go on, Creed is a well put together picture. It's
Yeah.
not poorly made, quote unquote. It's a little corner cutty here and there, but like it's the film itself as a movie is fine. But you compare this character, Creed, he is somebody who was raised very, very wealthy.
Mm.
He was somebody who had a great job at the beginning, but fighting was in his blood. He's just born to be a fighter, and he like had to prove himself as a fighter to make his mark in this world. So what does he do? He takes his trust fund and he goes to Philadelphia and gets a badass, awesome loft apartment that I would kill somebody for, and then immediately starts dating his downstairs neighbor, who's this super gorgeous, talented DJ. And then her ex-boyfriend is the heavyweight champion of the world, and he gets like, and that guy's like hitting on her, and little Creed gets all mad and challenges him to a fight, which becomes his title shot, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there thinking, like, this is who I'm rooting for. This entitled, privileged, spoiled, violent-tempered brat who wants to fight people
Mhm.
is my underdog. What are you talking about? You know, Rocky, the gorgeous, beautiful, wonderful world of Rocky is that Rocky doesn't want to fight. He just doesn't know how to do anything else. He spends
Mhm.
all of 2 and 4 trying to figure out ways to not fight. 5 as well. He doesn't want to fight. That's not him. He just wants to love, you know? And
Mhm.
that's all that society has room for him. And that's why he latches on to Adrian, who society doesn't value her. And he finds value in valuing her. And Adrian, the beauty of Adrian as a character is that she grows way more over the course of the 5 films than Rocky does. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And she becomes this strong, wonderful character who by the end she's the hero. You know what I mean? And this fucking movie, this entitled little shit stain, like, is I mean, and the sad thing is Rocky is a pawn in the first one. He's a fucking marketing ploy. It doesn't and he knows it, but he doesn't have anything else, so he has to do it. And this one, this guy gets his fucking title shot because the dude was hitting on his woman? Get out of here.
Right.
And what happens when Rocky reveals to Creed that he has cancer? What does little Creed do? I swear to God, he says, "How could you do this to me?"
Right.
What? And so Rocky Balboa set a bad precedent for me because for 14 years now, I've known that it can be done. I've known that a
Mhm.
sequel can be made modern successful, and can be made modern successful without compromising the integrity of what came before while still moving things forward in a progressive way. And Creed was the end of that era.
Wow. That is a, I think it's incredibly well thought out point there, and it's crazy because, like, I really enjoyed Creed a lot, but at the same time, I completely understand what you're saying, and I've always, agreed. I think you've brought your kind of, hatred of Creed up before on the show, and I and I get the criticism of the character, absolutely. I just think the movie overall isn't a very enjoyable movie, but
Right,
yeah,
I'm not
as
gonna
it re
deny that, you know what I mean? Like I
yeah.
said, like, I never deny that's why Creed 2 was so great to me because it was just a bad movie. So it's like, "Oh, it doesn't
Right.
matter." You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, no, but as it relates though to Bill and Ted Face the Music, I I think again these characters aren't so bad. I did like I said, I enjoy them. I just don't think they're given anything to work with. I think that a better story could have served Bill and Ted's goofy, very similar to them daughters. You know
Sure,
what I
but
mean?
to do that, they need to have something that they actually do other than fanning being fans of stuff,
Right.
because that's a toxic, trend right now in media, in society, is
Right.
that your fandom is your identity, and, um, and you also need, more dedicated actors. Not
Mhm.
necessarily better, I don't wanna speak to the quality of them as actors because I don't fucking know, I've never seen them in anything else. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? That I know
I
of.
like Samara Weaving. I've seen her in stuff. She's fun. I've never seen the other one
Her
though
face
before.
scares me, and that's not me saying she's ugly, like, she looks intense, kinda like Meg Foster or something. I'm like, "Ah."
Mm.
Um, I'm not saying she's ugly, I hope that wasn't taken the wrong way, I'm just like, she looks like she'd beat me up. Um, but, they just their performances were so phoned in to me.
Mm.
It honestly felt like when I used to go to, like, little community theater shows back in my hometown, like, little sketch comedy nights, and you could tell that,
Mhm.
like, one person, like, it seemed like, the actor who played, Theodore, that she it was like, could do, like, a fun impression and, like, "Oh, you'll be the Bill, I'll be the Ted. Don't worry, to just take my lead. It doesn't matter
Right.
that you haven't seen it, and neither have I. I just like this trailer." Um,
Right.
like, to her credit, she did a good, like, caricature impression, but,
Right.
you need Alex Winter. You need Keanu Reeves, and that's to say you need actors. Why is Jonah Hill so funny? Because he's not a comedian, he's an actor. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Like, he embodies what he's doing. That's why, even though I don't like him, why Leo DiCaprio can be very funny. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because he is totally investing in a moment. And that's where real comedy comes from. It doesn't come from what you know is funny. It comes
Right.
from experiencing.
Well, I'm gonna do the finished puzzle real quick, and we'll get into some closing thoughts here. Finished puzzle. All right, it's gonna include a bunch of these like kind of buckets of movies, but we've got sequels that were too big, sequels that no one asked for, cult sequels, sequels that were trying to act as their own movies, and the inevitable sequels. And
Mhm.
then I included in there as well the Star Wars sequel series, uh, the Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors 5 episode, Independence Day 1 and 2, and as well as, didn't I have one other one that I'm completely
No, you
drawing a
didn't do
blank
a
here? Oh,
5th
Jay
one.
and Silent Bob
Oh,
Reboot, which
oh,
was
yeah.
included in your bucket as well.
Hmm.
So, which was also completely inevitable. But let's get into any final thoughts. I mean, I instead of just a traditional final thought, I do want to ask you a quick question.
Mhm.
Obviously, it's impossible to know what these writers would have ended up writing at any given time, but do you think this movie would have worked out better 10 years ago, or do you think it would have worked out better 10 years from now?
Yes, I do think it would have worked out better 10 years ago. I can't speak for the future, and I hate dealing in hypotheticals, but speaking 10 years ago, yes, because if you're talking 10 years ago, you are talking pre-Creed,
Mhm.
you're talking you're talking,
Pre the Star Wars sequels.
pre the Star Wars sequels, you're also talking pre Tron Legacy.
Mm.
You're in that sweet spot where the Marvel movies had just started to kind of happen, right?
Mhm.
They're still in their experimental phase with Captain America being a great Joe Johnston 40s throwback, um, Thor having a wonderful like Kenneth Branagh Shakespearean eloquence. You haven't gotten yet to the flat wash, all of these movies are the same kind of era. You haven't gotten to the big machine of nerd culture yet.
Mhm.
Um, so Bill and Ted at that time were still cult icons. Now, if
Mhm.
anything's a cult icon, by the time the new one comes out, it's a sensation. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
everybody loved it the whole time, and it's
Exactly.
always been their favorite thing.
Exactly. which is why I've chosen to tattoo certain things on my body. You know what I mean? Like for proof that it's like, nah, dude, yeah, no, I liked Lady Gaga when Art Pop happened. You know what I mean? Like that.
Right, right.
Um, so I need to get a Eddie Murphy Ben Affleck tattoo. But I think that you had more of a chance then because there was not this set in its way machine. Like now there is a way to do a sequel. There is a way to do a reboot. Reboots weren't even like a thing back then.
Right,
This is
right.
before even X-Men First Class. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Which is kind of considered to be like the first like we use it reboot of a major franchise, or Batman Begins, I
Mhm.
guess too. So never mind, that was a lie. But yeah, I think that there would have been more freedom, not only in what they were allowed to do, but I think freedom of mind.
Mhm.
And I feel I got the vibe that everybody involved just kind of wanted to do another one, which is great.
Right.
That's great. Fine. That's a good
Yes,
enough reason for me.
they're having a great time, and that's cool.
Yeah, which I'll never fault anybody for. But it's tough. It must be tough to be a creator these days because, like it's hard to know what actually means anything
Mhm.
anymore. Like even like does Bill like if I'm, the guys who wrote Ed and Chris who wrote Bill and Ted, if I am I like, do people actually give a shit about what we were saying? Like, it's hard to even know, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Because now you've got filmmakers who did give a shit that don't even give a shit anymore. Hello, Kevin Smith. Like, it's a big pendulum swing that's happening right now that we're trying to kill mosquitoes with cannons, or we're trying to balance a scale by tipping it, which is just not going to work. And there's a lot of anger and resentment going on right now. Shit, 10 years ago, Barack was in the White House. Everybody was pretty happy about that, I suppose. So, like, putting Bill and Ted making Bill and Ted in a time like this, you almost have even more of a responsibility because people aren't being excellent to each other. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And and it's always been important to me that be excellent to each other comes first before party on, dude. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So yeah, they had more responsibility now, and you either have to dive in and nurture that, which is really hard to do, or you just want to do something nice,
Right.
And I think that's the attitude they went in at, which we all lost. I'm not gonna lie, like it was when I saw it in the theater, I was sitting 3 rows back because we got our tickets pretty late, but I
Mhm.
turned around and I looked, and there was I'm not making this up. This is not an exaggeration. I was in a theater the night that Donald Trump won the presidency, and it
Mhm.
was a double feature, and in between both movies, they came out and basically told us he had won, and I was sitting
Mhm.
in the front row, and I turned and I looked, and I had never seen that many faces so just like, "Oh, boy." Like, fuck,
Yeah.
Same look on people's faces after Bill and Ted. Yeah, you got people there with their fucking kids, obviously, like, and they're just like, you know what I mean? Like,
It's a bummer, dude.
yeah, it's a total bummer. It would be like if in Creed they added insult to injury and had some stupid plot line where it turns out Rocky had paid everybody to throw the fights, like in his career. You know what I mean? It's like that. It's that fucked up. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's that like it really is. Everybody quotes The Last Jedi too, where they say they hate that movie because the whole thing is like, let the past die, like kill the
Mhm.
past to move forward. And it's just amazing to me how people forget that the bad guy says that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? The bad guy says that line. And Yoda is the one who says you teach people by passing on your knowledge and by sharing with them your failures.
Mhm.
That's real. Ah, yes, Ryan Johnson should have directed Bill and Ted's Face
Ooh,
the Music. Now
I'd have liked that, I think.
now there's a fucking movie.
Well, I don't know. I think we pretty well covered this thing, and it. Like I said, I still had fun with it. I had plenty of laughs along the way, even though it was not great by any means. And I am going to be thinking, I think, all night about the idea of the. Uh, it's something I rail against all the time is the content. Turning everything into content, and I think that kind of message. Now that you've put that in my head with this, I don't know. It's gonna be tough to separate the two ideas.
Part of that disconnect that I have, like I said, is that I'm somebody who wants to be a part of this thing, this
Mhm.
whole, and I work very hard at it, and I maintain my fundamental, like, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything.
Sure.
So, like, for better or worse, to the best of my ability and knowledge and capability, I stand firm in my belief. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And this movie was, as I put it to you, was like an affront, not only to that belief, but to one of the few seeds that sprouted this belief in me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it took it to a level that Creed and Star Trek '09 had not dared to take it. Um,
Well,
and but
I think the only thing we could do is go back and watch the first 2, like, right now.
I've already done
I
it. What are
think
you talking about? I've watched it twice since I've seen this one. I
I'm
needed
sure you
healing.
did.
I needed
I don't
healing.
know where people find the time to watch this many movies.
Well,
I've watched more movies this year than I think I've ever watched in my life, and it's still don't have enough time to watch that many
to be
movies.
fair, I haven't watched as many as I was worried that, because you always ask that question at the end of this thing of like, have you watched any new movies lately? And it's like,
Right.
no, I've watched Bill and Ted and I watched Star Trek 6. Um, I don't recommend Star Trek 6.
Well, then I guess recommend the first 2 Bill and Teds to everybody if they haven't seen them somehow.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell people where they can find you and your work?
Okay, I made a promise on the last podcast that we would have our website by September 1st, but that's not the case. It will be September 11th. I know that sounds weird, but it's my mom's birthday. So, but on
All right.
September 11th, we will be launching our official Blue Means Pregnant website. I'll get you a link to it. You can watch every feature we've made, with the exception of our Western hate horses, including Tellers, which is inspired by your Treehouse of Horror.
Hell
Wish
yeah.
I hadn't killed that fish. There's a lot of content on there. It's half a lifetime's worth of dedication to creativity and community. And I'm really really excited to finally have it out there.
Awesome. Well, people go check that out. And Joe, thank you as always for being here. And we tried to keep it under an hour 15. That's fine. That'll work.
Shorter than a few of the ones we've done.
I think it is definitely shorter than the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, and that movie did not deserve as much time as we put to it.
You've heard others, but nothing could prepare you for the shameful stupidity that is the Jock and Nerd Podcast. Witness the hubris as they claim to be the world's authority on comic book movies.
Who said that?
Never said that. We've never said that.
Who cares? A jock said that.
Comic book, TV, movie reviews, news, and whatever they choose. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. The Jock and Nerd Podcast. Seriously, people really listen to this.
Jock and Nerd.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Bill and Ted Face the Music. I know a lot of people like this movie, and I didn't love it, but I had fun with it. Joe obviously didn't like it, and it is what it is. And as far as that conversation is concerned, one of the things I love about doing this show is that all of the guests that come on and co-host it with me, they all kind of bring something that is just so different, and you get a different kind of conversation based on who is going to be on the show with me. And someone like Joe, he really breaks these things down by these particular themes and ideas that are being put forward, or at least that he is taking from these movies, and I think it makes for some really interesting stuff. And so even though Bill and Ted Face the Music wasn't the great conclusion that I hoped for, I think it made for a great conversation, and I love doing this show. So we've got a lot more podcasts coming your way in the coming weeks. We've already recorded the next couple of episodes. We got a couple on some indie VOD movies that are out, and we're hoping to maybe do some of these movies that are coming to theaters now that theaters are starting to open up, across the country again. So lots of piecing it together coming your way. Make sure you are subscribed on whatever podcast app you listen to podcasts on. We're, of course, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on Pocket Casts, Stitcher, TuneIn, all those apps. Wherever there's podcasts, we're probably there. And you can rate and review us over on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And you can follow us on social media at PiecingPod. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/byDavidRosen. It's more of a all-encompassing David Rosen, that's me, Patreon account that includes my music. It includes Piecing It Together, also includes Awesome Movie Year and All Rice No Beans, and kind of just gets everything that I'm working on, any kind of bonus content that is produced to go along with any of those projects. It's going to end up on that Patreon. So check it out. Lots of cool stuff over there. And coming up this month, there's going to be some really cool stuff on that Patreon from my music, because I'm getting ready to release a new album in October. And so I'm going to start posting some special stuff on the Patreon in September in the lead up to that album. So make sure to check that out. And speaking of my music, let's close the show with a piece. And I think we should close it with one of the most rocking tracks that I've got to go along with this whole Bill and Ted thing. I played Rock and Roll Billy last week, and that one, that's kind of the ultimate as far as rock is concerned. But I'm going to play something else, though, with something else that rocks. And I think a good one would be the track Cut Open from the album An Unseen Sky. So let's go with Cut Open. I've played this on the show before, but I got to close it out with something that rocks. So let's play Cut Open, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together next week.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.